Hello and good evening. Welcome to everyone. This is an unusual time to do a LinkedIn Live, but it was because we have a forum of international experts. We're literally across the world, Japan, Europe, UK, and the USA, an incredible blend of experts. And here we have them with us today as we speak about options to do with COVID-19, a plan B. And so listen, let's just get straight into it. We'll start off with you, Knut. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where your interest in COVID-19.
I started my academic career in Tübingen in Germany with Klaus Dietz, who actually developed the relationship between the basic reproduction number and the herd immunity threshold. And I discovered early on that HIV would never spread among the heterosexuals, which was a very controversial thing. Then I came to New York and was for 20 years with the Rockefeller University as the head of biostatistics, epidemiology, and research design. And then I left Rockefeller for about two years ago to focus on my own company, where we're trying to bring to the market new drugs developed on the basis of the biostatistics and genetics results that I have developed at Rockefeller.
Wonderful, wonderful, tremendous stuff. We're really, really honored to have you with us. And we've got a blend of experts because we've also got Ingo from Germany. So Ingo, you're primarily looking at the expertise with regards to immunology.
That's right, yes. So I started my training in chemistry, and I did my diploma thesis in biochemistry at the University of Marburg. And then I became more interested into, actually I was from the beginning interested in cancer research, and couldn't do it in Marburg, and so I went up north for my PhD thesis and started working in immunology, did a postdoc in Florida with Dmitry Gabrilovich, also working on immunotherapy of cancer. And so that actually brought me to the immunology, and I have a bit knowledge about immunology and vaccines, and so I'm very much interested also what's going on with the vaccines.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ingo. And just to let you know, it's very late in the night for Ingo, so we appreciate that he's with us. In the same way, we've got Ivo, who is in Japan, so it's very early in the morning for you.
Yes, indeed. Sunday is just starting. So let me introduce myself. I'm Ivo Koutsaroff, and I am stationed in Osaka, Japan. I have been working many years in Japanese electronic industry. My background is in solid state physics and quantum mechanical computational simulation of various compounds useful for my area. When COVID started last year, I was invited to start doing some work on H2 antihistamine receptors, and then I enhanced my interest in various fields, how to connect the autoimmune diseases, how to connect the nutritional supplements, and so on, and what is the differences in each country's handling of the pandemic using their medical system, health system, and also the traditional social, ethnical differences that cause exemplary better behavior in Asia than other countries.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you, Ivo. We really have a nice blend of people. And one of the very first things that I want to say is that vaccines seem to be a critical part of the solution for COVID-19. What we have realized, however, is one, you should never put all your eggs in one basket, and you therefore must think of contingencies in case vaccines don't bring us the results that we hope for, one. And two, the vaccine rollout can only occur quite efficiently in first world countries, and it will be a struggle for many other developing countries across the world. We cannot afford to not have options for them. And so what we are doing today is that we are looking at any options that can help as a plan B, not just in the first world, but in the developing world, that can help. So first, your views say not on vaccines. Are you happy?
Sorry.
From a personal point of view, do you intend to get your vaccine?
My position on vaccines is I have always been vaccinated, for instance, against influenza. I'm not quite sure or satisfied with the safety and efficacy results that we have seen now. But my major concern is that we may run into the same situation that we have with vaccines, that we always have a vaccine for last year's disease and not for the disease that we are currently facing.
Wonderful. What about you, Ivo?
My opinion is the following. I have some hesitancy depending on the efficacy and safety of each particular one, but especially for mRNA types, I'm concerned to take it by myself for several reasons. One of them is related with insufficient long-term safety data.
Okay, understood. What about you, Ingo?
Well, I'm a bit less critical than both other guys, so I actually trust the science behind mRNA vaccines. I actually have to admit I tolerate vaccines pretty good. I've been vaccinated a couple of times, and I never had severe side effects, just a bit aching muscles, and that's all. So from my perspective, it's everything is fine.
Yep. I can say personally, I don't have an issue with the principle of vaccines. I just don't like needles particularly, even though I use them very much in my practice. So yes, I could be described as one of the people who doesn't rush to the front of the line, but I intend to get mine as well. So wonderful. So I'm going to start off with you, Ingo, and I want you to just very quickly give us a little bit of a summary with regards to the where we are with vaccines at the moment and the potential coming beyond what we have in front of us.
The rollout of the vaccine is really problematic at the moment. So every state wants to have a lot of vaccine very fast. So there is a delay in only the older population has the vulnerable people have the chance of getting vaccinated. On the other hand, the virus is mutating very fast. So no one actually, as I'm not a virologist, has expected that the virus would acquire so many mutations at one time, as we see in the UK and also in South Africa.
Yeah.
And actually, at least BioNTech has made efforts to show that their vaccine is able to deal with the virus. So the meaning is that the antibodies which are generated in the human body can neutralize the virus, and they showed at least for the 500 mutation that their vaccine is able, the antibodies that is generated by their vaccine is able to cope with the virus, but we're still missing data on the Delta 96 and Delta 70. So far we're off the hook, but this is but we're actually not all clear. So it may be that in the near future or in the future there appear mutations which actually render the vaccines useless. And this may be due to the strategy which all those companies that have produced vaccines which are currently approved just relied on one antigen, which is the spike protein. So this is if you have seen the pictures, it's the protein that is sticking out of the surface, and
Yes.
which the virus uses to enter into the cell.
So
And this is mutating very fast, similar, not as fast as in influenza, but
quite fast. Yes, they're quite right. And it's an interesting point with regards to the mutations and the risk with regards to vaccines. So from your epidemiological point of view, Knut, what do you think are some of the challenges that we face?
Right now we have a challenge that we try to do something like hitting the gas and the brakes at the same time in a car. Because vaccines, the purpose of vaccines is to shorten the time until you get to herd immunity, because you're inducing immunity faster than it naturally would happen. On the other hand, if you are mitigating, if you're doing lockdowns, you're trying to flatten the curve and do exactly the opposite. So combining these two strategies, while it may be intuitively sound reasonable, in fact, for an epidemiologist, is not reasonable. And the worst thing of the mitigation strategy is that, as we have now seen since October, late October, that we are breeding or incubating resistant strains at an increasing frequency, and it will become more and more difficult to have an effect of vaccines, especially if we are at the same time mitigating.
Yeah, I can understand that perspective, Knut, and it's one of the issues we're going to take up a little later on when we speak about the perspectives on lockdown. And so in a sense, Ivo, from a Japan perspective, how are the Japanese managing with regards to the vaccination and getting that rolled out across there?
Very good question, Philip. I want to say that they are not able to start effectively before March, and they only recommend, the Prime Minister office of Mr. Suga recommends this vaccine for all elderly, and elderly people need to make their own decision based on the existing benefits versus risks. So it's a kind of more cautious advisory rather than you must take it, there is no other option suggestion, which some other governments do. So situation in Japan is the following. They have now the new strains arrived. They have confirmed that from the national institutes for contagious diseases. And they know now that the death rate has increased from about 40 per day to approximately 70, 75 per day, which shows that the new strains have somehow higher mortality rate, I will say. Is not clear, but I stand to believe that's the case, because previous time in May, they managed very well with the first strand of the virus, with very few deaths at that time. So Japan is planning to do this for the elderly, then for the medical workers. So I will definitely think logistics challenges will probably take several months. I mean, I cannot say how much, but 4 to 6 months is very possible.
Right. That's a very, very important point. I guess Japan has some of the advantages that they have a much lower incidence of cases and deaths than many other parts of the world.
That's
now,
right.
Without a shadow of a doubt, one of the main things that we are seeing is that this virus is seriously affecting people who have associated comorbidities. And not in terms of the thinking with regards to the comorbidities and us generally being healthier, is that a good place for us to start if we are looking at solutions for the future?
I think comorbidities are a very good thing to start, because when we are thinking about metabolic and cardiovascular diseases that are definitely known to play a role, there are things we actually can do, and we have the tools that we can use. Everything else, or the treatments need to be tested, and it will take, and the vaccines need to be tested. It's taking a lot of time, but we can modulate the cardiovascular problems that we have and reduce the risk that arises from the comorbidities.
Yeah, that's a very important point. And I'm going to ask quickly again, Ivo, in terms of Japan has been using some pretty straightforward, simple strategies that seem to have worked in the context of how good people are in terms of following instructions and the principles like ventilation, really basic techniques. Any comments on that?
Okay, so in Japan, traditionally everybody wears a mask because that's how cultural aspect is. You don't want to induce inconvenience and harms to others if you are contagious. So this is a kind of a priori principle here. There is no need to be mandated or forced in any way. Second, ventilation. They have found with their supercomputer simulations that close room spaces are the most dangerous and easy to get infections because transmissions because of the microparticles traveling long time in the air. So strong ventilation, forced way or natural way through opening windows is very important. They applied in Japan for all public transportation, especially the trains, which are the most dominant way of transport here. Which probably 70% of the people use them for their going to work. So inducing lockdown in the sense don't go to office have helped Japan in May. So keeping the windows open in the trains help in the summertime, but in wintertime is more challenging. That's why I think in Japan the main source for transmissions now is being proven to be in the restaurants and bars. That's why now they are mandated to close 8 p.m.
Wow, yes, so that's quite important. And those are techniques that almost any country can do at any point at this point in the pandemic, not necessarily closing the restaurants, but using better ventilation and taking some of those things into consideration.
Few more things just to say, Philip, here. They put restriction of no more for people to sit on the same table. They need to have physical separation between tables with some kind of transparent plastic sheets or covers separating them physically, and masks use anytime when you don't dine. So means if you go, even in Japan, the difference is that I never saw any buffet type restaurant remaining open in the world, when in Japan they open how? They just enforce you every time before you go to pick up the food to disinfect yourself, the hands with some solution, put a temporary gloves, keep your mask on, bring your food from the source dishes and go back to your table and then eat there.
Wow, right, tremendous. Now, one of the questions I wanted to ask Ingo is that from the perspective that whichever way we take it, we have to hit a certain degree of uptake of vaccines. What does it look like, say, in Germany with regards to people being willing to take on the vaccination for you to get to 60-70% herd immunity? I'm going to come to an interesting point right after that with Knut and what we need to be able to get to that.
So according to polls, 60% are willing to take a vaccine. Is that the question, or what?
Yeah, so meaning that are Germany quite happy? Germans happy to take on board the vaccine? Is there a lot of resistance?
I think there is a big discussion everywhere in the world. So especially the new technique produces a lot of questions, and we have also this vaccination movement. So there are quite a bit of persons who actually don't want any vaccine.
Yes, no, I can imagine that. So it raises a point that I remember that Knut had said before with regards to what actually do we need to most efficiently get to herd immunity? I think that's an important point.
Well, one thing is the numbers that are circulating are not always well justified. We have a disease that has a basic reproduction number of about 2. So somebody who is infectious and entering a population who has never seen the virus would make 2 other people ill and infectious. That's not very high. It's not like measles, where that would be something like 15 or 18. And the important thing is that tells us something, what level of immunity we need. For a basic reproduction number of 2, we need 50% to be immune. Now, something that Sunatra Gupta said early in March, and that has been confirmed since, about half of the people, at least in Europe and North America, were already immune from cross-immunity with previous coronaviruses. So only about 25% of all people need to be vaccinated. And those who are already immune, of course, don't need to be vaccinated. In Japan, the situation likely was very different. So it seems that there was cross-immunity against that protected the Japanese population entirely. So virtually nobody died from the first wave. But what we now see, that the new strains are entering Japan, is a dramatic increase in cases and in death. So it may well be that the positive things we have seen earlier this year in March and April, that the situation in Japan will be much worse now that the Western viruses are coming to Japan and the benefit of cross-immunity doesn't exist anymore.
Very interesting point. Any thoughts on that, Ivo?
That's a very, very valid point from Knut, and I completely agree with that, because this also shows to me that the current mitigation strategy that applies everywhere, let's control in the airports, let's limit number of people coming to the country, will stop the transmission, is obviously not working. So there is another way of transmission which are less discussed publicly and less known exactly. But my perception is this probably is coming with a shipment of containers and maybe frozen food, which is widely imported in Japan.
Yeah, so it makes the point that even though we are doing vaccination against the current virus, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to get protection for future viruses. Any thoughts on that?
Sorry?
Any thoughts with regards to some of the future, the fact that the current vaccine is working now?
Well, actually, the good point is that we have developed a lot of working platforms. In terms of RNA vaccines, the vaccine can be adjusted, at least to the companies, very fast. So as far as I know, the mRNA is made like in a printer. So you actually give the sequence of the virus of the DNA sequence into a computer, and it sends it to a printer, and then you get the mRNA. So that is actually pretty fast. The problem is what happens with the already produced vaccines, and also to introduce the new vaccine strain or mRNA vaccine into the production. Other platforms are not so easily manipulated, so it will take much longer time.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. So then when we think about some of the more practical issues, so when we think about in terms of how we eat, Knut, you have some very, very clear research with this, because this is relevant to some of the work you're doing in your own company. Just tell us a little bit about what it is that you've been looking at and why you think this could help in terms of the pandemic, in as simple way as you can.
Okay, we were already talking about the metabolic conditions that create comorbidities. And there is a compound that has been used for years and has in Europe actually an approved health claim for metabolic diseases, and that is alpha-cyclodextrin. It is a ring of sugar molecules that is capable of carrying lipids around and has been used for several years to support people who wanted to have a diet to prevent lipids from being absorbed from the intestine. And now what we found is that when alpha-cyclodextrin is taken together with milk, it actually gets into the bloodstream, and we identified what it is that allows milk to be absorbed from the intestine, and it is capric acid, a molecule that is also contained in coconut oil, for instance. And once alpha-cyclodextrin gets into the bloodstream, it exerts its effect on cardiometabolic problems, reducing them, but it also does something that is even more important here, and that is, and we know that from extensive animal studies, that it's reducing the rate by which viruses are taken in via endocytosis into the cells and are being replicated in the cells. So if during every 7-hour replication cycle, we are reducing the rate by only 10%, after 5 days of incubation time, you have reduced the number of cells that got infected by 80 to 90%. And so if finally the antibodies are there to allow the T cells to kill all infected cells, the number of cells that gets infected is much smaller, the disease is much milder, and the risk of dying from the disease is virtually nil.
And so this is what I'm looking at in terms of plan Bs, which is that we need simple technologies that can be taken up by any country across the world, doesn't cost a lot of money. And I assume this is quite a simple supplement almost.
It's already on the market, so we are combining 2 supplements, and we're using a technology to make sure that they don't separate in the intestine, so that they always stay together, so that you have the optimal benefit.
Wow, wonderful. And so, Ivo, in terms of some of the other things that we have on the market,
but before we go to other things, let me say about this cyclodextrin. It is first mass produced in Japan because there's permits for this compound to be used in food without so much restriction. And second, the most important, there's a lot of Japanese studies, including one of the Nakanishi, who shows that this compound have strong effect on allergies and asthma prevention, and probably this relation to your theory about autoimmunity. So this compound could have double function, slowing down the incubation and replication of the virus, but also suppressing the autoimmune effects during that infection.
Is there anything known about the mechanism to reduce the allergies? Or
yes.
Knut, whoever?
Yes, it's a reduction of the production of arachidonic acid, and thereby of inflammation.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, I haven't spoken much about the theory that I have been working on with regards to autoimmunity. Basically, what we have proposed is that the virus in at-risk people triggers a viral-mediated autoimmune response, and this is why we get the cytokine storm. That would be very, very relevant in that context if we could reduce the risk of that kind of autoimmune response, which we know happens with the autoantibodies to interferon and ACE2 and so on that we have found so far. So that's quite tremendous. So Ivo, I wanted to clarify a bit more about your thoughts on some of the simple supplements that are being used across the world.
Yes, so that is the key point, that I strongly believe that this, how to say, nutritional natural diet coming from each country plus additional supplementation to maybe correct the slight deficiency that exists in every country during the due to these cultural differences. So I think everybody was focused during this prevention and prophylactic about vitamin D3 and vitamin K2, which definitely have beneficial effects. But based on the studies I check in Japan, they are not deficient in Japan. So this one cannot be assigned as a root cause for triggering these severe reactions, which we can say is autoimmune or not. That is a matter of validation. But what I'm trying to say is that other minerals also need to be put in the table. And based on the research I checked from several people who have published, luckily in 2020, shows to me that obviously zinc, selenium, and iodine may be related to a certain degree as a minerals to this SARS-CoV-2 and the new strands, which could have defensive mechanism against their replication and adverse reactions. So combination of definitely fatty acids, vitamins, which probably are not more than D3, K2, and maybe B complexes, and then several minerals, not all of them. Maybe we need to add also iron into this list. So repeat the list again: zinc, selenium, iodine, iron, and magnesium. I think that is not very difficult to get to everyone, that regardless this is advanced country or developing country.
Absolutely, quite right. And so I think that this is part of the issue. And what I think I want us to do now is that I've kind of opened us up now. And I think now, effectively, let us just talk about how can countries that don't have the vaccine, we've mentioned some of them, simple strategies with regards to, say, ventilation and the like, and distancing. We talked about some of the nutraceuticals that can help or just supplements. We've spoken about vitamins and minerals. Why is this not being given more attention?
I have a question to you, Ivo.
Okay.
So what is about microbiota? I think it plays a big role as well. I think you, as an Hungarian, are
you mean the yogurt curd? You mean Bulgarian?
Yeah,
okay.
Bulgarian, yeah.
So this is a good question, Ingo. I think I discussed that with several experts in the past few months. In Japan, they don't use the mass-produced probiotic lactic bacteria for their dairy industry, and also for the plant-based yogurts here, which are produced in large scales. So I think the diversity of the biodome, in the sense of different probiotics used in Japan, in not only in the dairy, milk, yogurts, but also in the naturally fermented foods, which includes also the fermented soybean natto, which contains significant amount of vitamin K2, could be one of the reasons why in Japan naturally this probiotics are sufficiently abundant and well balanced without monoclonical type, which probably are dominant in some other countries.
And so you think that this is what I'm saying. These are very, very simple strategies, almost technically. No, there's no reason why you couldn't have a probiotic mixed with some of these critical supplements in them, especially, as you said, not if it's milk-based and it needs milk. Couldn't that work?
I think it is very important to develop a strategy that is not expensive, easy to distribute, does not require long times of slow production, and that also is known to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Because the majority, if people want to take something as a preventive, then most of those who take it will never get ill.
Yes.
And if you are already ill, you can take a treatment and that has side effects and you will accept the side effects. But if you're not sure if you would ever get ill, you need things that are extremely safe, so that the treatment doesn't cause more problem than the disease would cause.
Absolutely. Here is a good point that, sorry, let me just change it around. Is this true?
Say it again.
I know what
question that has been asked.
No, obviously, our solutions, Philip, Ingo, and Knut, will be kind of not not helping the profits that other companies could make, but at the same time, as we say, our goal is not to make our personal profit. Our goal is to help less fortunate countries and people with less understanding what to do in this complex and confusing situation. I strongly believe that countries, they have permits for producing alpha dextrin, which is Japan, and also everybody can get their own either milk or coconut oil, combining
or
with
yogurt.
this yogurt, which is exactly Bacillus bulgaricus, which is presently there, and Japan actually imports that bacteria from Bulgaria. This milk bacteria, fermenting bacteria. So what I'm saying is not a matter of profit, is not a matter of alternative, is the matter we need to supplement that without question and without being accused that we are diminishing somebody else's returns, because we are not doing that. We are just saying, enhance your immune system naturally. Maybe the vaccine or the natural immunity will help you further in this frequently changing. And nobody mentioned that this virus is changing in the rate of 2 months. New strand can be formed. That is extremely rapid rate.
Yeah. So no,
and to answer your question, I think the focus on vaccines was primarily because this is something where a lot of money was invested and companies could make a lot of money, and that has skewed the whole discussion. So everything else was off the table. It was vaccines and only vaccines, even though we know that developing vaccines for respiratory virus diseases is challenging at best and has never been worked very well, because the viruses are mutating faster than we can adjust the vaccines that we are producing.
Yeah. So based on what we've said so far, it sounds as though a pretty simple design would be to create a yogurt that has the alpha cyclodextrin in it. It has the minerals and supplements that are needed, and people just take this on a daily basis. Why is that so difficult?
Shouldn't be.
Well, I think there are no studies on that topic. So
why do we need a study? It's like saying that we have no.
Well, if we say people buy this yogurt or eat more yogurt, it may help, but we have no proof that it helps.
No, but that's the point. We don't need the proof. We are just saying try it as a prophylactic, will be not harmful regardless how much additional benefit you gain from it. And the last more thing, in Japan they advertise so-called for diet people that want to lose weight. They said, please take alpha cyclodextrin because this will reduce your cholesterol and you will get less body index increasing. So it's a kind of, we can use it as a natural way of keep your shape and get your immune straight, which still makes sense.
Yeah,
we have something between 20 or 30 different studies that show that alpha cyclodextrin and capric acid have beneficial effect on obesity, on type 2 diabetes, on blood lipids. So we already know that in the worst of all cases, we will improve the comorbidities.
Yeah.
And we have a good chance to do even better.
So here's the question.
And if we have something that is so safe, and that is for every different strategy here that we were discussing. If something is extremely safe and likely to be beneficial, what do we have to lose?
I agree. So I straight away understood Ingo's point, because I have come across this quite often with regards to the evidence. Even now, therefore, this is a challenge that you would find someone would say, do we actually have enough evidence about some of these things we've spoken about, the nutraceuticals, the vitamins? Is there enough evidence to literally create one product that everybody just takes as a prophylactic?
Who should answer here?
I think we have more evidence for this type of prophylaxis than we have for vaccines. We don't have a single study that was where we had a significant effect at the conventional 5% level. Because for that, you would need to do a study in hundreds of thousands of people, and these studies have not been done.
Very, very
The
good
vaccines have been brought to the market without the typical evidence that you would want to have to bring something to the market. We don't have the statistical significance for the vaccines.
Here's an interesting point by Kanan, who says that preparing people from the immune point of view to respond properly to the vaccination is also a very important point from a nutritional.
Let me make a comment here. I heard from some kind of discussion on the web that in Russia they said, do not take your vodka before the vaccine, because your effect of the vaccine will be completely diminished. You are suppressing your immune system and you're taking a shot. So this is very similar, everyone here, Philip, that we need to promote. Maybe take your fatty acids, take your alpha dextrin if you can, because it's a allowable product you can purchase online in any country, and then go to the vaccination center. Do you see my point? We are not alternative. We are enhancing this existing solution, but we are saying, do not assume that solution alone is going to work if you don't prepare your body.
Yeah. Here is a question that was put forward on what about cheap drugs being repurposed? Now, this is more about, I guess, treatment, but it also represents a part of a plan B. And one of the big ones that's out there being discussed or being promoted is ivermectin. And if you've come across the math protocol, FLCC, they're strongly saying that this drug, this antiparasitic, has a significant antiviral effect in terms of the infection. Any thoughts?
What I see, the problem with drugs is that all drugs have side effects. All drugs try to force something. So they're blocking. So hydroxychloroquine is blocking the ACE2 receptor.
Mm-hmm.
Ivermectin is blocking the transport, certain types of transport into parasitic cells, but also into human cells. And if you do that for a short period of time, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can survive that.
So, and there,
prevention is not for a day or two or even a week. Prevention would be for 2 months or 3 months while the epidemic is running. And if you take something that has known side effects and you don't even know if you need it, that is not a good risk-benefit ratio.
Yeah,
so
no, that's a very valid point.
Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, whatever the drugs are, may be effective, and I think they are, when used as treatments in people who are ill.
Yeah,
but
that's
as a prevention, I think that is not a good strategy.
Okay, so let's come to one of the very, very big topics, and I will start with Ingo here, who will probably have a more neutral perspective on the issue of lockdown. This is something that is happening in various ways across the world. Thoughts on lockdown, Ingo? Is it too crude a method? Is it hampering our...
Okay, so I think we have to differ there because I think it depends on the country. So in Germany, we have a lockdown which seems very
Harsh.
no, not harsh, not
Not
harsh,
harsh. Okay.
not harsh at all to compared to other countries. So even though people are complaining because they are restricted in their normal life, um, I think to bring the virus down and the circulating virus down, it is a temporary. It's temporary good, and also um, to get more space in the ICUs because some of the clinics are operating at their limit.
Yeah,
So
I
I can
agree. Yeah.
only talk about Germany, but I heard this night that Britain also has a very, very um, grim situation.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We are in lockdown. So before I get to Knut, who I know has an interesting perspective, let me just hear from Ivo because the Japanese have a different thinking, I guess.
No, they have imposed also a lockdown now, but that's the key point. This lockdown is not on the entire country; it's only on the five the most spreading prefectures in Japan, Tokyo and Osaka areas. So the lockdown in Japan is the following: government suggests companies employees 70% of them do not go to the offices, work from home, and somehow the companies comply with that. And second thing is the lockdown here is primarily on the entertainment business in the evenings because they want to close it early on. Of course, lockdowns, in my opinion, have beneficial effects, but they do harm the economy, and that effect is irreversible. In Japan, all small businesses of the restaurants that get bankrupt, some people commit suicide with much higher rates than the previous years.
Knut, what
I
is
would
your
like to
perspective?
I would like to add a view of an theoretic epidemiologist. Lockdowns can have a benefit if a hospital system, the whole hospital system, is on the brink of collapse. And then for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you could have a lockdown to prevent that from happening. And that's how it was actually proposed in March 20. Running a lockdown for a longer period of time has more adverse events than benefits. One thing is, of course, the economy and all the deaths that come by destroying the economy. But there is an even more direct benefit. When we are mitigating, let's start the other way around. The vulnerable should mitigate. They should wear a mask. They should stay at home. They should isolate because they are the people who will fill the hospitals. The hospitals are not full of children with COVID.
Yes.
There are no children with COVID in the hospitals, at least not any relevant number. However, so if the vulnerable isolate and mitigate, the virus will run among the low-risk populations, and we will have less or no impact on hospitals.
Yeah.
If, on the other hand, we mitigate everywhere, the vulnerable don't have the benefit anymore.
Yeah.
So then
I completely understand that perspective.
Will run at the same rate among the low risk and among the vulnerable populations.
So
and
I'm going to throw
don't have the benefit anymore.
So I'm going to throw out an idea
will become
here.
Infected, and if more of them become infected, they will die, and they will fill up the hospitals.
So I'm going to throw out a concept here.
Great Barrington Declaration said, and I had published that in March, way before, we should help the vulnerable to self-isolate and mitigate. But if we do the same thing in the whole population, it's counterproductive.
Yeah. So here's the question that I have wondered about, and I'm just throwing out the idea that I had. We know that children and the people less than the age of 40 have a very low mortality. So it's not to say that they don't die, but there are much smaller numbers. In order to get to herd immunity, I have wondered, why is it that in effect you don't bring all the children together in almost a camp setting, and your aim is to get all of them to get the virus, kind of like what we used to do in the past with chickenpox. And you spread it around. You want all of them to get infected. You keep them isolated in a space where they then build the herd immunity much faster than you could do with a vaccine. Is that dangerous? Is that impractical? Because we're in a lockdown anyway.
I don't think that is politically feasible.
A good answer, Ned.
No, but guys, in Japan, opposite. The mandate of the lockdown is never close the schools. And that's a very reasonable point, because they know that even there's a transmission there, that is not the part of the population you need to isolate.
Correct.
The worry, though, say for instance, in the UK, is that if you have the children spreading it around and then coming home, they're still going to spread it to the adults and potentially the higher risk population. And so if you are trying to protect them, if you have any mixing, you are then putting them at risk.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, but
now you have to think in probabilities. You cannot have zero risk. Could that happen? That a child infects the parent and the parent infects the grandparent. Could that happen once in a while? Yes, it could. But we already know that there is very little transmission within families. Transmission is at events where people sing and shout, and lots of people are in an enclosed space and interacting with each other. We had that in Gangelt in Germany very early on. One of the first studies published found that the people who were at a mass or event where they were preparing for a carnival, they got infected. Lots of people got infected. And they went into almost a very few infected family members.
Interesting.
So the transmission in families is not so common that this really would be a very dangerous thing. And even in these situations, then one would say, okay, the children and the grandparents should be a bit separated and wear a mask if they meet. That's all fine.
So here's a question then. That's
closing
practical.
Schools, and even for the same argument, closing businesses is counterproductive.
Yeah. So imagine, therefore, that we have a situation where our hope that the vaccine is going to then bring us quickly to herd immunity is not feasible. It's neither feasible to isolate those groups who are at risk for the long term. How do we get around that?
We have to let the epidemic run. We should keep the schools open. We should keep the businesses open. We should keep restaurants open. Nobody ever gets infected by eating and drinking, which are constantly diluting the saliva. That is not the situation where you're easily transmitting a respiratory disease virus. So we should keep
on that.
Pardon?
But
I was asking Ingo.
But Knut, I think the Swedes they tried this approach, and in the end they were pretty sorry because they had a lot of death.
Sorry, Ingo. Ingo, I not agree completely on that. They have that, but still much less than other countries, and they quickly go down. So the trend is the most important, not that they have that in November, December. Everybody have that in that time. So the Swedes did not anything wrong, in my opinion. Their approach was right.
Sweden.
You mean
Sweden, yes.
Sweden.
Yeah, Sweden. Yeah. So we're at a point now, and
but Philip, before you go, you
Yeah.
should mention that what Knut mentioned before, not today. 25% of the population may already have the herd immunity, and we should keep this in mind. So
yes,
if you need
that's a very important point. Is
so
that
if we need to
easily
bring the other
testable?
25%, maybe we can solve the pandemic. So that's why we need to go back to testing, but not the standard testing.
How do we do that quickly? Is that easy for even a developing country to ramp up? No.
No.
That would have to be a first world view in terms of being able to test for antibodies to
Right.
general coronaviruses, and therefore not needing to vaccinate those people and speed up the reach to herd immunity.
I think everybody is agree on that.
Mhm.
But even it's difficult, even it's challenging. I think funding of the governments and the institutions should be focused on that as well, not only on vaccine development.
So
Yes.
we're coming to the end of our talk, which has been fascinating. And let me just see if I can summarize what I think I understand. Essentially, we have the opportunity to improve the general health of populations with very simple mechanisms. As we said, with certain things like yogurt, as we said, the alpha cyclodextrin, some of the very simple vitamins, minerals, especially vitamin D, vitamin K. And this is something that any country could almost not mandate, but make easily available to the general population, especially the at-risk population, to improve their immunity. And the problem is that I am not sure if we can get to 60% or 70% of world herd immunity within less than 3 or 4 years. It's not even feasible.
That's right.
Right.
It takes if you do nothing, it takes a month or two. And we have seen that about 200 times in the last 100 years. This is what happens on the average twice every year, that an epidemic runs, and after a month or two, it's over.
Yeah. Do you think, when you talked about my politically difficult decision with schools, now is that politically feasible? I don't see how any political or any system can.
We have done that for 100 years, twice, and even the last season, we had an influenza B epidemic, and then we had an influenza A epidemic. And only the third was the COVID epidemic. The first two epidemics, they were running, they were ending, and nobody did anything about it. This is the natural way it has happened for the last 100 years, twice every year on the average.
So
I take your point.
Philip, only one comment I want to make sure. If each government and national authorities plot 2019 versus 2020 deaths, we can easily see that the only issue of this COVID virus is happening from November 2020, not before. The average deaths are not higher than before. I'm talking excluding some cases of US. Let's say all the rest of the world, everybody will overlap. So statistical data presentations is lacking in many publications and government authorities, which makes additional unnecessary panic.
Very short point. Without lockdowns, we wouldn't have had the resistant strains that were incubated. We would not have the wave that we have now. The wave we have now is the result of the lockdowns.
A very good point. So listen, gentlemen, we have just come about to the end. This has been truly fascinating. What I want each person to do is to just in about a minute say what their takeaway point would be in terms of what would be their recommended strategy for moving forward if they could speak to the powers that would make these decisions. I'd say starting off, Ingo, you want to go first?
Okay. Well, I don't know what to say.
we already have talked a lot, yes.
Can someone go first?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Knut, do you want to go first?
I can go first. The first thing to do is open the schools and open the economy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing that needs to be done, because that is something where we have no evidence that it does anything good, and we know that it does a lot of damage. So that's the first thing. The second is allow the vulnerable to self-isolate and give them all the support that you can, and isolate the nursing homes, prevent viruses from getting into nursing homes, rather than sending infectious seniors into the nursing homes so that they can infect everybody else. The next thing then is give people the natural, simple ways of preventing bad phenotypes or disease phenotypes to develop, and that would prevent the hospitals from filling over. And then we're almost, and if you have vaccines, yes, develop vaccines. And there's nothing bad about vaccines, but just shutting down the country until a vaccine is developed is not a rational strategy.
Wonderful. Ivo, your thoughts?
I just want to say the following. Before we say we have solution, we need to implement all other additional existing logical, scientifically solid options, what they are. Let's take the following emerging new field. I heard recently that there is a so-called immunonutriology, a new combination of how to boost immune system through nutrition. And this is my perception. Apply such kind of alternative, scientifically solid approaches. We don't need a justification of something that is relatively low cost, relatively safer, and relatively longer term validity for keeping the people healthy with strong immune system, even in the winter time. So apply these kind of approaches. They're common sense. When you treat asthma and allergies, when you treat autoimmune diseases, you also need to apply the same active compounds as you do for this viral infection. What they are fatty acids, they are polyphenols, they are antioxidants, several vitamins and minerals. It's very simple. This is not a need to international body to endorse our opinion to save the world population from this economic disaster.
Yep, wonderful. And Ingo, I know you must be very tired. It's midnight
Yeah.
at the moment. So we appreciate you.
What I actually want to say is that the people trust more in science, and I hope that that a lot of people in the world get vaccinated, and I hope we can cope with the pandemic.
Wonderful. And thank you very much to everyone here. This has been a wonderful discussion. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. I couldn't go to all of the questions. There were quite a few questions that came up, but they weren't necessarily following the sequence of our discussion. And so thank you all very much. And just hold fire there, gentlemen, as I close off.